Okay. Well, we'll kick it back and review 14 real quick because I know we went over that. It talks about improper mourning. As we all know, the Deuteronomy, this is right before they're about to cross over the River Jordan. Before they cross over and actually do what the Lord tells them, hey, I want you to go over there and take this. This is a big review of everything, over all the laws they went over and the things they are doing. You're not going to go over there and do what's right in your own eyes, because what's right in my own eyes and what's right in Delmer's eyes may be two totally different things. And the thing is, none of us may be really right. So God's like, I want you to do it this way. But also, because we all know if you're going to go over there, there's other religions over there. There's other gods that are over there, these people are worshiping. There's things that are abominations to me, which we all know if it's going to make Lord wretch, that's pretty nasty what they're doing. Something pretty bad. So when you're mourning, he says, don't mourn this way. Don't do what they're doing over here. Then he's also telling them what's clean and unclean. Now, another reason, there's always people talking about like whatever's clean to eat, what's unclean. Yeah, there's some people say, it's there to protect them because they didn't know how to properly to fix it. Yeah, that's one thing. But also these other religions, these other people, they use the food to worship. They eat something like this to worship and honor their little gods. And God's like, you're not going to partake in that. I'm going to set you apart as my people. You're not going to partake in any of that. So that's what he's trying to do here. And he talks about tithing, the different tithes and all that. And then you get into chapter 15 where after every 7 years, debts are canceled. So, and the Lord's like, hey, just, loan to each other, but don't be owned by anybody. Don't loan out to the other countries. Don't owe any nation other than within yourselves. But also, he says, every 7 years, if I cannot pay my debt back to, let's say, I'll go to Delmer, and Delmer's like, hey, I need money real bad. I need something. I need help, or I need some cattle, or I need some food. Delmer lends it to me, and Lord says, be willingly doing it. But if I can't pay it back in 7 years, whatever I have left, if I have any left at all, it's free. Don't worry about it. And then also the question rises up, well, what if that 7 year, let's say we're on the last year, the 6th year, next year is the year where it all cancels out. God's like, don't withhold, because that's going to be right around the corner, and they're going to just give it to him anyway. He says, I gave this to you. This is what I'm doing for you, because remember, Egypt did the same thing, because whenever you left with everything. So I want you to be willing to give to each other and help each other out. And then also concerning bond servants, and this is also falling into the 6 year kind of situation here, is if one of your brethren, got sold into slavery, or you got them, you can't, within 7 years, they're free. But don't send them away empty-handed. You send them away, give them what they need to get them back on their feet. But also, if they choose to stay, they can stay. Because if they enjoyed serving you, and it's like, you're very honorable, and they find it honorable to serve you, then you could keep them. You just have to put an earring in their ear on the doorpost, and then they're with you for the rest of their days, this, that, the other. But that's kind of how all that's working out right there. Now we're about to go into chapter 16 to review Passover. Like I said, does anybody have questions or comments? Anybody read ahead? Okay.
When the year of Jubilee was set up for just Hebrew people, so that if one of the brother Hebrews got in trouble, he could work for somebody if they were willing to do that, take care of him, his family, whatever. That's 7 years. But they knew the agreement that God had made with both parties. Right? They worked for him. If they worked for them those 7 years, and they didn't let them. They didn't just kick them out. They had to provide for them, which was a great way of doing things. And he also told him, said, you can't make a Hebrew a slave like a slave for
Yeah.
You can't do that. But he did give an option to be able to help them and for them to really pay for what they were doing.
Exactly.
It was a great setup for people.
It is. And also, it also kind of mentions you don't run them to the ground either. Don't absolutely dog them to death either. That was also kind of the agreement as well. Is that, you may be their master, I guess, in this situation, but don't run them in the ground. Don't abuse them to the point, that's also part of the build-up setup too. It also serves as a reminder that they were also enslaved in Egypt. And when they left Egypt, they had everything they needed. Or actually, God was all they needed, but God's like they had the surplus of everything they had ever had. They walked out of there and they kind of plundered Egypt, really, honestly, even though Egypt's like, here, take everything, just go away. So it's kind of also serves reminders that even though you were in bondage, you were going out with everything you need so you'd be set and ready to go. So what God was it serves, because everything he's doing here serves as a reminder of that they're his people, where they came from, what he's done for them, and what he's going to continue to do for them. This is really, really breaks it down, is that everything's a reminder for them to remember, God, you have God, he's with you. He's done this for you. This is where you came out of. You are his people, and that's what he's doing. Pretty much all this is a constant reminder. So we go on to chapter 16. It says, observe the month of Abib. I think I said that right. And keep the Passover to the Lord your God. For in the month of Abib, the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night. Therefore you shall sacrifice the Passover to the Lord your God. From the flock and the herd in the place where the Lord chooses to put his name, you shall not eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread with it. That is the bread of affliction, for you come out of the land of Egypt in haste, that you may remember the day in which you came out of the land of Egypt, all the days of your life. And no leaven shall be seen among you in our territory for 7 days. Nor shall any of the meat which you sacrifice the first day at twilight remain overnight until morning. So here, whatever feast that you're having, nothing else should be there by morning time. You may not sacrifice the Passover within any of your gates which the Lord your God gives you, but at the place where the Lord your God chooses to make his name abide. There you shall sacrifice the Passover at twilight, at the going down of the sun, and at that time you came out of Egypt. You shall roast and eat it in the place which the Lord your God chooses, and in the morning you shall turn to go to your tents. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day there shall be a sacred assembly to the Lord your God. You shall do no work on it. So he tells them what they're doing. Once again, this makes like, I forget how many times we actually looked over Passover throughout, for all the way from Exodus through Leviticus to this and all the other places. But here he's saying you don't eat unleavened bread. And this is also a reminder that what the Passover is for. It's a reminder of what happened in Egypt, that they left Egypt. And guess what? He also, the last thing he promised to do to Pharaoh, because the Pharaoh still refused to let him go. This is a reminder for all this right here. And they are to do it forever and ever and ever. Amen. And that's a reminder to remind them. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Unleavened bread, see, leaven, it could rise. Unleavened doesn't rise. Yeah, that's what it is. They were skedaddling before they did it. It was way, because when he said, hey, you had to get out of there at haste, you're getting out of there quick, you didn't have time to let it rise, because it takes time for bread to rise. It really does. It takes time for it to rise. So they were eating flapjacks as they was walking out of there. So that's what is a kind of reminder that, hey, you left in haste, you left in this manner of fashion. You didn't have time to gather your stuff together because you was getting everything handed to you and you was booted out. That's what it was at the time.
Leaven, too, is also a representative of sin. Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
Don't about the leavening, and I think that's probably one of it too, but
Mm-hmm.
probably part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Have nothing in it except flour and water. Right?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be pure, I guess.
But when you added something to it, the leaven, and you added something, and he talks about us being with the leaven in our lives. Once you get it there, how do you get it out? It's there.
It's there.
So he wanted them to come out
Mm-hmm.
in a hurry.
But also,
But he told them early on, about 400 years ago, come out with great substance.
mm-hmm.
And they did. The Egyptians was willing, like you said, to give them everything they wanted just to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
I said they had a terrible time with all the plagues and everything, just about wiped out the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was. It all serves as a reminder, like you said. Because, like you said, yeah, they were in haste, but also, thankfully, Carol and Delmer had backed me up on that. Because 11, once you put it in there, you can't get it out, and it doesn't make it form a rice. So this is kind of a whole, like a reminder. When you eat this, yeah, you're supposed to be pure. That's what the bread's supposed to be pure, just water and wheat or whatever they use to eat over there to make the bread. And then it also remembers that they were getting out of Egypt pretty quick because they were like, y'all need to get out of here. We're done. Lord, He made His point. We need to get you out of here. That's what it's really going down. Thank you. No, thank you for asking questions. Anybody else?
Well, in the New Testament, remember Jesus said, "Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees." So it was consistent throughout.
It is. That's what it represents. Sin. All right, verse 9. You shall count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin the count the 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain, and you shall keep the feast of weeks to the Lord your God, with the tribute of a freewill offering from your hand, which you shall give as the Lord your God blesses you. So remember, free will is whatever you're willing to give. Whatever you're willing to give. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your son, your daughter, your male servant, and your female servant, the Levite who is within your gates, a stranger, and the fatherless and the widow who are among you, at the place where the Lord your God chooses to make His name abide. And you shall remember that you are a slave in Egypt, and you shall be careful to observe these statutes. Now remember, at this point, a lot of that generation that was slaves in Egypt, there's not many of them left. So now this is a reminder to the next generation, the ones that didn't have to go through bondage, but they've seen some wonders and miracles, not as much as probably the older ones did, but they've seen them. And this is a reminder. This continues to say, you came out of this. Your family, your generation before you came out of this. So this is a reminder. So He's trying to make them remember, to keep these things. Now, in the future, as we continue on, is Israel, just like everybody else, we fall and falter and fail, and they do the same as well. So that's just kind of a reminder. All right, verse 13. You shall observe the Feast of the Tabernacles 7 days, and when you gather from your threshing floor and from your winepress, you shall rejoice in your feast, and you and your sons, and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, and the Levite and the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, who are within your gates. So remember, what he's saying here is everybody, whether you're a stranger, whether you're a Hebrew, whether you got a whole family, or if you've just been widowed, or you just don't have a family at all, whatever it is, everybody's celebrating. Everybody's in on this. All right, 7 days you shall keep a sacred feast to the Lord your God in the place which the Lord chooses, because the Lord your God will bless you in all your produce, and all the work of your hands, so that you surely rejoice. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God in the place where He chooses, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and the feast of tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessings of the Lord your God, which He has given you. In verse 18, justice must be ministered. It says, you shall appoint judges and officers in all your gates, which the Lord your God gives you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. You shall not pervert justice, and you shall not show partiality. Sorry, I can't talk. Nor take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. You shall follow what is altogether just, that you may live and inherit the land which the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not plant for yourself any tree as a wooden image near the altar which you built for yourself. To the Lord your God you shall not set up a sacred pillar, which the Lord your God hates. So, here, this last bit, which is kind of pretty self-explanatory, says, when you're judging, if you were set appointed as a judge, don't let anything twist your judgment, or don't show partiality. Even if it's your son sitting here and this is some stranger sitting there, even though your son may have done something to this stranger here, don't show partiality to your son. Be just, and also don't take any bribes. Whether it's, hey, I'll pay you off if you just overlook this. Don't take that. And also, he even goes down and he says, once again, don't mess with any images. Don't set up any pillars. Don't do anything what God hates. What our God hates. And this is what he's talking about. He says, don't do this. Does anybody have questions or comments about any of that? All right, we'll continue on chapter 17 then. And in verse 1 says, "You shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God a bull of sheep which has any blemish or defect, for that is an abomination to the Lord your God. If there is found among you within any of your gates which the Lord your God gives you, a man or woman who has been wicked in the sight of the Lord your God in transgressing his covenant, who has gone and served other gods, and worshipped them either the sun or the moon or any of the host of heaven, which I have not commanded, and it is told you that you hear of it, then you shall inquire diligently. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination has been committed in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has committed the wicked thing, and shall stone to death the man or woman with stones. Whoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, and he shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses shall be first against him who put him to death, and afterwards the hands of all the people. So you shall put away the evil from among you." So, once again, this is like, well, that's kind of harsh, this, that, the other. Once again, God is trying to set just look, you don't follow these other gods, just because once you start, it becomes a problem. and the thing is, he didn't base it off of, I could go out and say, well, so-and-so is doing this, I need two or more witnesses. If it's just 1 witness, it's going to be probably dismissed. But if there's multiple people saying, yeah, this is really happening. But then it also says, the hands of these witnesses shall be the first against. So if they're, let's say, I probably see this as a way of, if they were coming together and they were going to plot against somebody, then the guilt's on them for starting it. Really, if you think about it, because they'll be the first ones to throw the first stone. So that's kind of I kind of see that in that whole situation there. Does anybody have questions or comments about any of that? Because we know before Israel even got here, they had problems with the Baal. I forgot his name already. Before they got over there, they had issues. They had problems, and they fixed the problem. And this is God's way of saying, hey, we need to stop this stuff because you don't partake in that. And if you do, fix the problem. Get rid of it because it's going to be there, and it's going to cause problems. So, any questions or comments?
Not always, and a lot of this carries forward, of course. But he gave some strict instructions to his people at that time. Now, Jesus said he didn't come to do away with the law, but he come
To fulfill the law. Amen.
To become children under grace, covenant of grace.
Amen.
Covenant of law.
Amen.
Okay. But he gave instructions how that they should gather, what they should do when they gather. And he says, and he makes provision for them. He says 3 times in the year shall all the males appear before the Lord thy God in a place which he shall choose. How do we meet before the Lord today? We come to the place that God has set aside the church.
Yeah.
Okay?
Amen.
3 times, he said 3 times in a year. We meet 3 times a week.
Supposed to.
And then he said it's going to be a feast of the unleavened bread and the feast of weeks and the feast of tabernacles, and they shall not appear before the Lord empty. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessings of the Lord thy God which he hath given thee. So he made provision. You give that which you're able. So as the Lord has blessed us, the Lord has blessed us with a lot, then we give a lot.
Amen.
If he bless us with a little, we give a little. But he set up a really good situation for his children. Every man should give as he is able, according to the blessing that the Lord has given. So that's what we do.
Amen.
And then he goes to judges and judgments.
Amen.
And I'll quit.
It's okay. It's okay. I love it. All right, verse 8. If a matter arises which is too hard for you to judge, between degrees of guilt or bloodshed, between one judgment or another, or between one punishment or another, matters of controversy within your gates, then you shall arise and go up to the place where the Lord your God chooses. And you shall come to the priests and to the Levites and to the judges, and to the judge there in those days, and inquire of them. They shall pronounce upon you the sentence of judgment. You shall do according to the sentence which they pronounce upon you in that place which the Lord chooses. And you shall be careful to do according to all that they order you, according to the sentence of the law in which they instruct you, according to the judgment which they tell you. You shall do, and you shall not turn aside to the right hand or to the left from the sentence which they pronounce upon you. It says, now the man who acts presumptuously and will not heed the priest who stands to minister there before the Lord your God, or the judge, the man shall die. So you shall put away the evil from Israel, and all the people shall hear and fear, and no longer act presumptuously. And we know that Israel has acted presumptuously in the past, and we know what happens, that they were dealt with. They were taken care of. When the Lord told them they were to go over and they didn't, they refused the first time. And then they decided, then he tells them, okay, you're going to wander. And they're like, well, no, we're going to do it anyway. And then lo and behold, that happened. And then whenever they did, when parts of them drifted off to whichever way, they were dealt accordingly as well. And the thing is, the whole thing is talking about here is like, if it gets too hard for you to judge, that means you need to go to the Lord in this. Because you go to the people who talk to the Lord and they're like, all right, what do we need to do? And this is what the sentence is. And he says, you're supposed to just do what your sentence is, whatever it may be. And don't act presumptuously. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that? All right. And we'll go on to principles governing kings. When you come to land which the Lord your God has given you, and possess it and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me, like to all the nations that are around me, you shall surely set a king over you, whom the Lord your God chooses. One from among your brethren, and you shall set a king over you. You may not set a foreigner over you, who is not your brother. But he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. Neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. So here is when he says, when you put a king over you, do not put them to where they're having all this gain for themselves. Don't go back to Egypt, because I told you not going back there. So if they do, they're not going to send you back to Egypt. And all these other things that's going on is going to cloud their governing. It's going to cloud them. It's going to kind of almost sever their connection with God, because they're going to be focused on these things more. They'll be more concerned about where the earthly treasures is than what God has provided for them. Because God provides everything. All that stuff there, it only lasts for a little while. The thing is, God, he's eternal. And what he's saying here is that they must stay focused on God, not on these other things, so that way he could serve your people. Verse 18, also it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write to himself a copy of this law in a book, from the one before the priests, the Levites, and it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, and be careful to observe all the words of this law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel.
You see what happened when the people set a king up over them, and when God set a king up over them. The people wanted Saul, and they got Saul. It wasn't a good thing. But then God picked somebody out of his people that he wanted, which David did it, and he became a great king.
He did. He was a great king. And the thing is, I mean, Lord kind of said that right here is like, when you do get a king, when you put one over yourself, make sure that they do these things, because what he's more or less saying, they're not going to be above you because they're a king, because he's just like the rest of you. He came out of the same thing you came out of. There's nothing above beyond. He's just there trying to govern you, which I'm the one technically governing you, because he's the one come through. I'm working through him to govern you. But when he starts doing these other things, these worldly things, that discerns judgment. That messes with your judgment. That makes you worry about other things than focusing on what God wants for his people and what he wants you to do in his will. And that's what he's referring to there. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
We see that sometimes in things that we've read so far.
Mm-hmm.
When the people pick the king, that was in direct violation of God's command, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because God's going to pick it.
Mm-hmm.
And they forgot that. And sometimes when they pick their own king, well, not sometimes, every time that they pick their own king, it did not go well for them.
Exactly.
And even for the ones that God had picked, they seem to have forgotten these other commandments that God had set out. And things didn't go well for them either.
No. I mean, it's written right here before they even got a king.
Right.
You know, he's going to have to do this, but because he's going to have to read this every day, so he learns to fear, knows where I want him to do, and this, that, the other. And like you said, they forgot. Some had multiple wives and concubines, and they seen what happened with under their leadership. And they also had other concerns, like whatever earthly values they had. They like, we need to do this, do that, the other. And the Lord reminded them, was like, you're not supposed to do that. And then they were more or less rebuked, and they repent, and usually they come back. But it's like you said, they always forget, and there was always held accountable for what they done, because they're not above everybody else. Like Moses is a prime example. Yeah, he was serving God, he was doing it, but he did one thing. He's like, God told him, go do this. Moses, he did it, but not the way God told him to. And to show, you're not going to not get be held accountable. I can't remember the word for it, but
they trusted in themselves.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
At some point they turned from God, maybe because of the riches they had or the success they had,
mm-hmm.
and they seem to have forgotten why they were in that position.
Mm-hmm.
And they started really trusting themselves and turning from God, and God rebuked it.
He set them straight. He set them straight every time. And it's interesting.
That sounds familiar.
It does. Even our own personal lives, we're no better. We like to look at Israel and it's like, ha ha ha. But in reality, we're the same way. Honestly, we are the very same way. We like to think we're not, but we are. And you had all these reminders here, and we still forget. We still fall short of what God wants us to do. And that's, like we said, that's when Christ comes in, he fulfills his law. So that way we're no longer able to fall short, because when God looks at us, he sees Christ in us, and he's fulfilled the law. And we're not doing away with it. Like you said, it's a schoolmaster to the old. So it's still there. It's still something for us to look at and study and to understand, and all teaching for us, and understand God better and what he wants us to do in his will. All right, chapter 18, verse 1 says, the priests, the Levites, all the tribe of Levi shall have no part nor inheritance with Israel. And remember, God is their inheritance. Serving God, doing what he tells them to do, he is their inheritance. They don't get any of the land. There's some cities set aside where they could reside in, but God is their inheritance. Their work for God is their inheritance. So God's like, you're not getting in these other lands, things like that. You're serving me. I set you aside from everybody else. But remember, his system is where they could take care of the Levites, because they can't grow their own things. They can't make money their own way. So God set up a system to where when you bring in something to sacrifice, you get portion of it. So he's taking care of his Levites. It's actually a very fantastic system, really, to where even though they may not got an inheritance, they're serving God. God is still taking care of them through his people. All right. As this says, they shall eat the offerings, the Lord, made by fire, and his portion. Therefore, they shall have no inheritance among their brethren. The Lord is their inheritance, as he said to them. Pretty much what I said. I should have just kept reading, and we would have got it. Verse 3, and it says, this shall be the priest's due from the people, for those who offer a sacrifice, whether it's a bull or a sheep, and they shall give the priest the shoulder, the cheeks, and the stomach, the first fruits of your grain, and your new wine, and your oil, and the first of the fleece of your sheep, you shall give him. For the Lord your God has chosen him out of all your tribes to stand and minister in the name of the Lord, him and his sons forever. So if a Levite comes to any of you, or any of your gates, from where he dwells among all Israel, and comes with all the desire of his mind to the place which the Lord chooses, and he may serve in the name of the Lord his God, as all of his brethren, the Levites do, who stand there before the Lord, and they shall have equal portions to eat, besides what comes from the sale of his inheritance. Does anybody have any questions or comments about portion for the priests and Levites? All right. So this is his system to kind of take care of them. So this is what he's had set aside for them, because, like I said, they can't grow their own stuff. They can't do this. So this is God's way of saying, hey, I'm taking care of you through my people. Verse 9, when you come into the land which the Lord your God has given you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. Pretty much what he's been saying this whole time. Do not follow in those abominations, because there's different things they do. Some may even sacrifice children at the time to their gods. Some may even do some horrible, horrendous acts and they're feeding these statues, these gods, and things like that. And God's like, I don't want you partaking in any of that. Even if you're saying you're doing it for me, you're not partaking in any of that because it's an abomination. It makes me want to retch. Do not do it, is what he's telling them. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes a son or daughter pass through the fire, or one who practices witchcraft, or a soothsayer, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, a medium or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For all who do these things are an abomination to the Lord, and because of these abominations, the Lord your God drives them out before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God, for these nations which you will dispossess, listen to soothsayers and diviners. But as for you, the Lord your God has not appointed such for you. The only people that God appointed them is prophets. And even then, he even tells them, if they're prophesying, and some of the things they say is correct, but they tell you to do something different, they are not sent from me. They are not one of my people. So the only people that God ever sent is a prophet. And if they're not even, if they're telling you to do this or that, and it's opposite of what God's telling them, then they're not the prophet sent from God. So he's telling you right here, none of these other people, sorcerers, witchcrafters, mediums, all this, that, the other, they're not part of me. They would do that, but we're not. You do not partake in that. And that's a kind of a trend going on in today's society too. It's kind of bad. Verse 15. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me in your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear according to all you desired of the Lord your God in Horeb, in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, nor let me see this great fire any more, lest I die. And the Lord said to me, what they have spoken is good. I will rise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and put my words in his mouth. And he shall speak to them all that I commanded him. And it shall be that whoever I will not hear my words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. So it's, like I said before, the only people he's sending is prophets, and if they're doing anything of what the opposite God tells them to do, or tells what the people is doing, they need to be gotten rid of. That's a problem. And if you say in your heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, and the things does not happen or come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously, and you shall not be afraid of him. So, he's like, once he does a few things, they don't come to pass. They're not mine. He's acting presumptuously. You need to fix this problem. He's accountable for what he's doing. All right. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that? All right. Verse 19. Now we're talking about the cities of refuge. So when the Lord your God has cut off the nations whose land the Lord your God has given you, and you shall dispossess them, and dwell in their cities and their houses, and you shall separate 3 cities for yourself in the midst of your land, which the Lord your God has given you to possess. And you shall prepare roads. Sorry, lost my place. You shall prepare roads for yourself and divide into 3 parts the territory of your land, which the Lord your God has given you to inherit, that any manslayer may flee there. Remember, when he's talking about manslayer stuff, it's accidental murder. Something happened. It's like, oh my gosh, my hand slipped. My axe flew across and hit him in the head. And it was actually an accident. You could flee there until, I think it's till that priest dies. The priest of that city dies. Then you're free. But if you're found outside that gate, the Avenger of Blood has the right or authority to do whatever he wants to do with you. You have to remain in that city throughout this time. I'm about to get a little more to it because I'm a little rusty. And it says, verse 4, it says, and this is the case of the manslayer who flees there, that he may live, whoever kills his neighbor unintentionally, not having hated him in the past, in time past, as when a man goes to the woods with his neighbor to cut timber, and his hand swings a stroke with an axe to cut down a tree, hand slips, pretty much the same example, from a handle and strikes his neighbor so that he dies, he shall flee to one of these cities and live, lest the avenger of blood, while his anger is hot, pursue the manslayer and overtake him, because the way is long, and kill him, though he was not deserving of death, since he had not hated the victim in that time past. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall separate 3 cities for yourselves. Now, if the Lord your God enlarges your territory as he swore to you, your fathers, and gives you land which he promised to give to your fathers, and if you keep all these commandments and do them, which I command you today, to love the Lord your God and walk always in his ways, then you shall add 3 more cities for yourselves beside these 3, lest innocent blood be shed in the midst of the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, and thus guilt be bloodshed be upon you. So what he's saying is, once your territory grows, add 3 more. Because if you don't, and innocent blood's being shed, that's on you. That is going to be on you. So he said, add these 3. But if anyone hates his neighbor, lies in wait for him, rides against him, and strikes him mortally, so that he dies and he flees to one of these cities, then the elders of the city shall send and bring him from there and deliver him over to the hand of the avenger of blood, that he may die. Your eyes shall not pity him, but you shall put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it will go well with you. So he also addresses those that intentionally kill somebody and they flee here. Then, I guess through witnesses, if they're like, hey, he hated him, he rose against them, he was taken care of, well, then they are delivered over to the avenger of blood. So you have those that unintentionally did it, they're not going to be handed over, but those that are intentionally doing it, they are handed over to the avenger of blood. In verse 14, you shall not remove your neighbor's landmark. This is talking about property lines, which the men of old have set in your inheritance, which you will inherit in the land that the Lord your God has given you to possess. So here he's like, don't move boundaries in this. You're pretty much stealing from each other. I set this aside from you. This is your when you inherit this, don't move each other's boundaries. Don't mess with each other's boundaries, because you're stealing from one another is what he's saying. And then we go to the law concerning witnesses. One witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or any sin that he commits. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, the matter shall be established. If a false witness rise against a man to testify against him of wrongdoing, then both men in the controversy shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. And the judges shall make careful inquiry. And indeed, if the witness is a false witness, who has testified falsely against his brother, and he shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So he shall put away the evil from among you, and those who remain shall hear the fear and hereafter, and they shall not again commit such evil among you. Your eye shall not pity, life shall be for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. So here is where he puts that out. Does anybody have any questions or comments about chapter 19? Anybody? If I get started, I'm afraid I may run out for this next chapter, so we can conclude if no one else has anything to say or any comments or questions. No, thank y'all.